Last summer, I drove from Phoenix to Flagstaff for a job interview. I didn't have much money, so I booked the cheapest motel I could find. It was one of those old roadside places with a flickering vacancy sign and doors that opened directly onto the parking lot. The receptionist barely looked at me when I checked in. Room 214. I carried my bags upstairs and immediately noticed something strange. Room 213 was directly beside mine. Its door was covered with a strip of yellow tape. I assumed it was being renovated. I didn't think much about it. That night around 2:16 a.m. I woke up to a loud scraping sound. It sounded like someone dragging a heavy piece of furniture across a floor. I sat up. The sound came from the wall beside my bed. Room 213. Scrape. Pause. Scrape. Pause. Then 3 loud knocks. I called the front desk. The receptionist answered after several rings. I asked if someone was staying in 213. There was a long silence. Then she said, "No." I laughed. "Well, someone is definitely in there." Another silence. Then she quietly said, "Sir, nobody has been in that room for 8 months." I didn't sleep much that night. The next morning I looked at the door. The yellow tape was still there. I went to work. When I returned that evening, I noticed something. The tape had been removed. I asked the receptionist about it. She looked confused. I didn't remove it. I went upstairs. Room 213 was locked. That night I stayed awake. 2:15 a.m. Nothing. 2:16. Scrape. My entire body went cold. The furniture was moving again. This time I could hear footsteps afterward. Slow footsteps. Someone walked from one side of the room to the other. I pressed my ear against the wall. A man whispered something. I couldn't understand it. Then he said clearly, "He's listening." I immediately stepped away. I called the front desk again. No answer. I called 911. Before I could explain everything, the scraping stopped. Then I heard knocking. Not from 213. From my own door. 3 slow knocks. I didn't move. Another 3. Then a man's voice whispered, "Wrong room." I stayed completely silent. After about 5 minutes, the footsteps disappeared. Police arrived shortly afterward. They searched the hallway. Nobody was there. They opened room 213. The room was completely empty. No furniture, no bed, nothing. But one officer noticed something on the floor, a fresh footprint, barefoot. They searched the entire motel. Nothing. I checked out immediately. Before leaving, I asked the receptionist why the room had been closed for 8 months. She hesitated. Then she said a previous guest had disappeared from that room. Police never found him. The strangest part? His last known activity happened at exactly 2:16 a.m. I never stayed in a roadside motel again. This happened when I was driving through Nevada. It was almost midnight when I stopped at a roadside motel because I was too tired to keep driving. The place looked old, but the room was clean. The receptionist handed me a key. "Room 18. Then just before I left the desk, she said something strange. "If you hear the phone ringing tonight, don't answer it." I laughed. I thought she was joking. She didn't laugh back. Around 2:30 a.m., I woke up to a ringing sound. My room phone. I stared at it. "Ring, ring, ring." I remembered what she had said. I ignored it. After about 30 seconds, it stopped. Then it started again. This time, the ringing came from the hallway. I opened my door. There was an old black telephone sitting on a small table across the hall. I'd never noticed it before. It was ringing. I walked toward it. The moment I picked it up, a man's voice whispered, "He's in your room." I dropped the phone. I ran back inside. My room was empty. I checked the bathroom. Closet. Under the bed. Nothing. I locked the door and pushed a chair against it. Then I heard footsteps outside. Someone slowly walked past my door, stopped, then walked back. I stayed awake until sunrise. When I checked out, I asked the receptionist about the phone. She looked confused. "What phone?" "The black one in the hallway." Her face changed. She quietly asked, "What room were you in?" "18. She looked down at the desk. Then she said, "Room 18 hasn't been rented in 11 years. I laughed nervously. "That's impossible. You gave me the key." She didn't answer. Instead, she pulled out an old binder. Inside was a newspaper clipping. A man had disappeared from room 18 11 years earlier. His body was never found. The last thing he had done was call the front desk. The call lasted 7 seconds. The only thing recorded was his voice saying, "He's in my room." I left immediately. I never found out who he was. But that night, I finally understood why the receptionist told me not to answer the phone. I was traveling through Oregon when I stopped at a motel during a snowstorm. The receptionist gave me a key. Room 307. The elevator took me to the 3rd floor. The hallway was long and completely empty. I found room 307 at the very end. I opened the door. Everything looked normal. Bed, TV, bathroom, small desk. I went to sleep. Around 3 a.m., I heard someone knocking. 3 times. Knock, knock, knock. I opened the door. Nobody. The hallway was empty. I closed it. Then I noticed something. The room number outside my door had changed. It now said 308. I opened the door again. The hallway looked different. The carpet was older. The wallpaper was stained. And the lights were flickering. I walked to the elevator. The button for the 3rd floor was gone. There were only 2 buttons. 1, 2. I pressed 1. Nothing. I pressed 2. Nothing. Then the elevator doors opened by themselves. Inside was a woman. She was standing with her back toward me. I said, "Excuse me." She slowly turned around. Her face was completely pale. She whispered, "You shouldn't be here." The elevator doors closed. When they opened again, I was back in front of room 307. I ran downstairs using the emergency stairs. When I reached the lobby, the receptionist looked at me. I told him everything. He stared at me, then asked, "What room did you say?" 307. His expression changed. He pointed toward the elevator. "Our building only has 2 floors." I looked behind him. The elevator display showed 3. I turned back toward the hallway. For just a second, I saw a woman standing at the end of it, the same woman from the elevator. Then the lights flickered. She disappeared. I checked out immediately. Months later, I searched for the motel online. I found an old news article. The motel had originally been 3 floors. A fire destroyed the entire 3rd floor 20 years earlier. Several guests died. The 3rd floor was never rebuilt. But the strangest part was the room number mentioned in the article, 307. That was the room where the fire had started. And according to the article, the woman who died there was still listed as a guest. If you have a real scary story that happened to you, your family, or someone you know, I want to hear it. Send your story to the email in the description. Tell me what happened, where it happened, and anything you remember. Your story could be featured in a future video. And remember, some stories are better left untold.